Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. We've got a great episode today. We're going to talk about the rebirth of Thompson Center. Thompson Center has been popular for years with a lot of shooters, and unfortunately they went away a few years ago, but now they're back with many of the same people. So I called up Roy Huntington, who is arguably an archbishop in the Church of the Thompson Center, and he's going to talk about what it means to have the company back. But before we get to that discussion, I would like to welcome a new sponsor here to the Guns Magazine podcast. Our friends at Riton Optics have decided to come on board as our presenting sponsor, so many thanks to them. So before I talk to Roy Huntington about Thompson Center, here's a quick word from Riton Optics.
This is where we go to feel alive. This is primal. This is where we go to train. This is tactics. This is where we take it all the way. This is conquer. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is Riton.
Good morning again, Roy.
Good morning. Seemed like we were just here.
We were. This week, you're back, and we're going to talk about uplifting news. So appreciate you joining us. We're going to talk about Thompson Center. And Roy, Thompson Center's gone, right? They're dead. There's nothing left anymore, right?
Well, that's what they say.
That's what they said.
Yep.
No, we just had a meeting yesterday with Greg Ritz. I'm not sure of his exact title other than he is the Grand Poobah at Thompson Center, the new Thompson Center. And he talked about some of his plans, which I'm not really at liberty to talk about, but it sounds like they're going to pick up where they left off. So I've gotten a lot of questions about this. The rumors have been floating inside and outside the industry for a while. So I got to say, the reason I picked this topic as newsworthy is I've gotten a lot of inquiry, both from our audience and from inside the industry, asking about this. What have I heard? What do I know? Well, hopefully maybe we'll be some of the first people to actually break the news. So anyway, I think we should start at the beginning. Roy, you're a huge proponent of Thompson Center products. We talked about them back in episode number 196. We actually put the SSK Contender on the cover here a few months ago of Guns Magazine, and your history and Thompson have been very intertwined. So before we talk about why you're so enamored with their products, let's talk about the long and sordid history of the name and the company. So,
well, basically the late 60s, through a myriad of events, people got together and they eventually honed a design of a single-shot pistol that we knew as the Contender. And it was a bit of a shoestring thing initially, but once they got it up and running, they basically, it took them several years to basically develop their market, because initially people didn't understand it. They went, why would you want a single-shot pistol? I have no idea what you're talking about, right? And then as soon as they realize that, well, gee, you can change calibers. You have 22, you have 38, 357, then suddenly people became more and more interested. And as the company grew, and they had other offerings, they had a rifle based on the Encore frame, which the Contender was the first one. They had kind of a second generation Contender, and then the Encore. And the Encore was a bigger brother of everybody, and that's what they built the rifles out of. Although you could get Contender rifles, the old, with the longer barrel and a stock, but the Encore gave you a lot of versatility, bigger calibers and stuff, and so they were all hugely popular. But as in so many of times when you get what's basically a family-owned business, and it gets bigger, and it gets spread a little bit too thin, and too many products that went into black powder. And then finally, it ended up just sort of collapsing on itself, and that's eventually they sold to Smith & Wesson, and Smith & Wesson ran with it for a few years, actually had a presence at the SHOT Show and introduced a bolt-action hunting rifle and but then Smith & Wesson, for whatever reason, decided to just shut that entire product line down. And that happened a few years ago. And there were, people were rending their clothing and pulling their hair out, all the Contender guys saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So Greg was involved with Contender before. As I recall, I think he was ultimately the company president after the family left. And so he was there through the transition to Smith & Wesson. Yeah. And so that's where we're at. And they're still hugely popular. As a matter of fact, there's a magazine, or it's a quarterly, basically a news magazine put out by the Thompson Center Collectors Association. Their website is thompsoncentersociation.org. And let me give you their phone number, 207-252-3663. And if you're really interested and you're an owner, or you'd like to be an owner, you'd like to learn more about the history, learn more about the guns, for $35 a year, you have to join this association. And trust me, this quarterly magazine will be full of new information as the new Contender gets off the ground.
Yeah, exactly. And looking at the kind of the Smith & Wesson years, it was an odd mixture. I had always heard, whether this is accurate or not, but I've heard it from multiple people, that basically Smith & Wesson wanted the casting plant because Thompson Center was noted for doing very good casting work, and Smith & Wesson wanted that for their own production. And then they kind of tied it with the Performance Center, which was a weird marriage. And like you said, it just kind of never went anywhere. It didn't seem like there was much of a vision. And Smith & Wesson's had its trials. So not sure what all happened, but basically they just decided, that's it, we're done. So it's pretty cool that Greg and company are restarting the brand. And what we talked about back in that earlier episode, number 196, was SSK Industries. And they make a Contender, I don't know if clone is the right word, but talk about SSK a little bit, because Greg got asked this in our meeting, and he said, no, we completely support what they're doing. The rising tide floats all boats. So they're competitors, but it seems like it's going to be a friendly competition to keep this market segment going. But talk about SSK.
Well, the Contender platform is interesting because it's a bit like a Ruger 1022 in that there are so many aftermarket manufacturers, and until SSK developed their version of the Contender frame, which I might add is excellent, and but until they developed that, there were no new frames available of the Contender or the Encore. And so the used guns had really strong value and can actually continue to go up in value. And so, but there are aftermarket barrel makers or component makers, there are stock makers, optics and, everything you can imagine if you want it for a Contender, you pretty much can find it out there. And then now that SSK has filled the void with the frame, that suddenly means that people can now build new rifles, Contender rifles, and build pistols, and so that's what that is. And I think what Greg might have been talking about is just the fact that this focuses interest on the product, which means if people are interested, they want SSK, they buy a Contender from them, they buy a barrel, they think, wow, that's cool. Maybe I need one of those Encores too. Yeah. So because a lot of people sort of start with Contender and they'll get a 22 barrel or a 357 barrel or something like that, and then once they learn the platform and they realize how much fun it is and how versatile it is, then it just kind of goes on from there. I won't say how many barrels I have, but it's an embarrassing number. So
it's only a problem if you can't stop, and I don't think you can stop. So
I know. I'm at that point now where I was looking at in the latest edition of One Good Shot. They always have for sale or trade and stuff like that in the back, and it's always a lot of really cool and interesting things. Because remember, there is a lot of these early buyers are now in their 80s and stuff, and so they're getting out of shooting, so they're selling off their collections. And the prices can be really, really affordable. But I was a bit embarrassed by the fact that I was looking at this long list of different barrels, and I kept thinking, well, I don't need that, I don't need that, I don't need that, I don't need that. And I went, oh, I didn't need any of them.
Yeah.
So, I know. It's a good problem to have, though.
Yeah, exactly. And, something that Greg said that I wish more companies would recognize, he said, we've got to kind of, easy for me to say, rebuild our audience and our product and our brand name. And he said, the reason we had the meeting, they didn't ask for this podcast, but he said, we value what Guns and American Handgunner do, and we think you're very important to what we're trying to do. So that's kind of why we had the meeting. But he also said, we're going to be a new product starting from scratch, and there may be a stumble or two. And I said, well, that's not a problem. We deal with that all the time, and it's rare that a new gun comes out that there isn't some kind of issue. But he's recognizing that they're going to try and start slow. I think they're focusing primarily on the Encore. They've got some other plans that I'm not at liberty to discuss, but I think it's going to be interesting that they're starting out saying, we may have some growing pains. Typically, what that means, in my experience, is they won't, because they're cognizant of that.
Well, and unlike somebody coming out with a new, I've got this new polymer pistol, right, that no one's ever heard of before.
Yeah.
They already have a huge consumer base.
Yeah.
And these people are hungry for the product. And so as soon as they flip the switch, and as soon as there's that first ad in American Handgunner and Guns magazine, and people know these are available, I think it's just the train is going to take off. I really do. I think their biggest challenge is to the old Contender owners and Encore owners. They were very used to this sort of family-like personal relationship that the customers had with the Thompson Center. And in other words, you could call there and talk to somebody who was genuinely interested in what you had to say, and who knew the products, and who, if you wanted to talk about the 221 Fireball and which barrel length, well, they knew, and they would talk to you about it.
Yeah.
And so, and of course that's lacking virtually everywhere today, except for the small shops, So if they're going to come out and do this, I think that the priority needs to be sort of on the marketing side of the house, and that is, yes, have a good quality product, because that would be the death knell if your gun's cracked or something right away. That word would spread fast. But boy, the customer service is going to be really critical. These people want to be. This was a happy place. PC gun owners, it's a happy place for them. In other words, when they break their Contenders out, and they know there are these other people that like these interesting, unique guns, and they're friendly, and they're kind of slow. You don't have to shoot a lot of ammunition. They respond well to reloading. They're extremely accurate, and so they like that family. And so I think that's one of the reasons why Smith & Wesson crashed and burned with it, because they never got that. I went back to the factory a couple of times where TC was part of the highlight that they were talking about, and they had a lady who was in charge of the program, and she was really interested. She suffered from a lack of general knowledge about what it was and the community, but she was trying. But Smith & Wesson just had no support. And from what I understand from members of the collectors organization, when they attempted to get warranty work done or questions about parts or things like that at Smith & Wesson, they were kind of getting zero response. They were getting the generic call center, and the people there would look at a magazine and see if they had that part. But it'd be like calling Ford and asking about your Model A. Nobody there would know anything. So, but all success to them. I think if anybody can pull it off, Greg will. Yeah. So,
well, he mentioned something in this meeting you touched on, that he's been surprised at the number of folks that want to work for them, and he specifically mentioned like the call center people, the technicians, and all that. And it just echoes what you've said about. I'm going to use a word here, Roy. it's almost a cult. It's cult-like in the devotion to these guns, and you kind of explained why. But now that I've called it a cult and probably offended some folks, continue.
No, I think you're actually right, and I don't think anyone would be offended because it is it's like a religion. It's the TC religion, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Ford Model A collectors.
Yeah.
It's like anywhere you go, if you say, "Oh yeah, I have a Model A," and he goes, "Oh, I have a Model A," well, you're best friends now.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like being a Mason, I think, or something. Yeah. You know, and so this is like that. I mean, I was in a gun store a while ago, and I was looking at a Contender that they had for sale there, and there was another guy who was looking at the Contender, and I said, "Wow, you know, that looks like a pretty nice, clean gun." He says, "Yeah, it really does. Do you shoot Contenders?" I said, "Oh yeah, I have a lot." And now we're best friends. You know, it's like, well, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And whatever happened? And G. Smith and Wesson did this.
Yeah.
And, you know, and now we're like talking away.
You know what I like in those situations? If your spouse or significant other is present, the eye rolling, the sighing, the crossed arms, because you've just killed 3 hours just right there.
Kind of. I think if it were me, if I was doing the marketing for the new TC, I would absolutely focus on not cutting edge technology, even if they use that. There's nothing wrong with that. You can talk about it, fine. But it's got to be, do you miss the family? Do you miss the camaraderie? Do you miss him? Welcome back to the Thompson Center fold.
Yeah.
You know, basically, you know, we are here. We want to reconnect with our old friends and customers. I mean, that's what I would be doing. And, I mean, if you need to go after younger shooters too, I mean, that'll happen probably. I would solicit the older shooters to go out and find younger shooters to bring them in, you know, because I don't know that you'll be able to interest a 25-year-old gamer in a break open TC, you know, single shot.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you know, it's interesting, and I think we discussed this a couple of episodes ago in talking to friends in the industry. One theme that I'm starting to hear is everybody talked about during the panic buying that how do we reach out to all these new gun owners? Well, what they're finding is there is a certain percentage of them who discovered, I like to shoot. This is pretty cool. So that accounts for some of the resurgence of the 1911. And I wonder if the Thompson Center, the Encore and Contender might fall into that too, that once you're done with your Polymer Wonder 9 and you want to understand other things and more, as you once said, a greater appreciation for the finer things in life, it'll be interesting. I think maybe some younger shooters will want to pick up a Thompson Center product.
I think you may be right. When we did that cover story on guns on the SSK receiver and the House of Arms accessories that went with it, I heard from a lot of readers independently of that. Yeah. And just saying, wow, I had no idea. I'm so interested. I've heard about these guns before. You know, I want to learn more about them now.
Yeah.
And these were almost always people who did the progression. Yeah. I owned a Ruger 1022. I owned a Polymer 9. I bought a 1911, and now they're just like, what else is there out there? You know.
All I can imagine is you typing, "Bless you, my son. Please come into the sanctuary."
That's right. Open your eyes and you will see. So, but I think that it is interesting and it is, I think, appealing. But it is a tough. You need to get him in the door first. So, yeah. And I know I can speak for you and say we'll certainly do what we can to help out.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I was telling him in the meeting, and I hope it didn't come across as marketing speak from an editor, but I really, truly mean this, that our audience is completely wrapped up in these guns. You know, it's funny, we've talked about this before when I talk to marketing directors and salespeople, and we tell them, you know, our audience loves revolvers. We love Thompson Center. We, you know, all this kind of stuff. And they look at you like, but those aren't Polymer 9s. And I think it blows some people's mind that there's still a huge audience out there for kind of, as you said, the better things in life. So,
well, I'm with you because it never ceases to amaze me. I'll write a story on some Polymer 9 and kind of cue the crickets.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be one letter saying, well, how much are they? Or, or something. But boy, if I write something, or any of us write something significant about revolvers or classic revolvers or some custom revolver, they come out of the woodwork, and then anything about usually classic and old guns. I've done a series of short videos where I've basically dug deep in the safe and got out a lot of these interesting old guns.
Yeah.
Well, they have thousands and thousands of views almost immediately, and a lot of good comments, people wanting to know more because they're more interesting. And anytime I've ever written anything about a Thompson Center or a Contender or an Encore, it always generates huge reader interest. And so it's not me, it's the platform.
Yeah.
They just love that old stuff. So,
well, as an interviewer who's conducted thousands and thousands of interviews, I like to put the guest not in a corner, but I like to make them have to dig deep. So I'm going to do that to you right now. And I'm not going to accept, gee, I don't know, or I'm not sure. What's your favorite combination of barrel and frame and all that? What's the one that if you're just shooting for fun, which we actually don't do all that often, but if you're just shooting for fun, what's the one you pick?
2.
Okay, I'll accept 2 answers.
Yeah. The 22 long rifle barrel is
really
infinitely fun. First of all, the darn thing will shoot 1.5 inches at 100 yards. It's absolutely astounding. And it's inexpensive to shoot. It doesn't have a lot of fire and brimstone. It's very pleasant. And then next up, I would say the 38 357 barrel.
Really?
Yeah, because I shoot 38 wad cutters in it usually that I reload, and I mean it'll shoot a one-hole group at 25 yards.
Yeah.
I mean at 50 yards it's a dead squirrel, and so I just really like that. I have other barrels, a 221 Fireball, I have a 3220 and 32 H&R Magnum, and they're all fun.
Yeah,
and I exercise all of them. But if I had to do that horrific thing which you just said, which is distill it down to one or the other, I think if it was one, it would probably be the 38 357.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be the one, because the 44s are interesting, the 45s are interesting, but I think the 38 357 you can take out and just have some fun for an hour, and it doesn't cost you very much money. But if you load it with a 180 hard cast at 1,300 feet per second, you could shoot a buffalo if you needed to. So,
well, and you made a good point there that I hadn't thought about, but we probably need to discuss it. Is for folks that haven't used these, I think the opinion is typically, those are just for hand loaders that are doing load development and all that, and they certainly are important to the folks that do that, but there's much more than just a test platform for your hand loads, right?
Yes. I think it is an excellent test platform for a hand load. I bought a 6.5 inch 45 ACP barrel for my Contender, and I bought it primarily because it looks really cool. I made a short video and it's got like 80,000 views. People are really enamored with it. But the other thing that's important for me is that if you really need to find out how accurate a 45 ACP load is, you shoot it in that,
Yeah.
And it will really tell you what that load will do. And so, they're good for that. But you know what? They're factory loads. And for people who don't understand, you buy a Thompson Center Contender frame, and then you have a myriad, hundreds of options for grips and forends, and then the barrels are virtually 99.9% interchangeable. And so if you have a Contender frame, then you can buy a 22 long rifle barrel or a 30-30 barrel or a 45 Colt barrel or a 221 Fireball barrel. You name it, and you can buy a barrel. So you can have one frame, and barrels run from $250 to $500 each. And so basically for $250 to $500, you have another gun.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's pretty cool, actually.
Oh, is there anything that's just not cool about it, Roy?
Well, the early guns were hard to open.
Yeah.
And because you pull the trigger guard, there's a lever at the back of the trigger guard, and you pull that, and that breaks the action open. And the early guns were hard to open. It was almost a two-handed situation. I actually learned from Ken Kelly at Magnaport, because he's a Thompson Center maniac. He said you put your fingers on it, and then you smack your finger like that, which sounds terrible, but it doesn't hurt at all. Boom, and that pops them open. But after that, they made what they call the easy open Contender, and from then on, it's really easy. It just opens. Oh, something else that people don't realize is that you can interchange between rimfire and centerfire. So you have one frame, but by merely just adjusting a little thing on the hammer, you can go from rimfire to centerfire.
Yeah.
So then you can have 22 long rifles, centerfires, 22 Magnum, whatever you want. So I don't know. Maybe we need to do another show.
Always. That's the fun thing about our talks is I come up with 50 more ideas after we've covered the topic at hand. So
it's true.
Well, the topic at hand, of course, is the rebirth of Thompson Center, and we wish Greg Ritz and the entire team over there good sailing, and we look forward to them being another a bigger force in the shooting industry and expanding the cult of the TC. And I guess we'll make Roy Huntington an archbishop in that religion.
I just won't wear one of those pointy hats. Hey, also, don't forget One Good Shot, the official magazine of the Thompson Center Collectors Association. Join. They're nice people, and it's cheap, and it will fill your brain.
Exactly. And I will try to remember, or our producer Ashley will try to remember to put that down in the show notes. And if you have thoughts or comments on the old Contender, the Encore, new, old Thompson Center, leave it to us. Roy especially checks our YouTube comments a lot, and I'll certainly take your emails at editor@gunsmagazine.com, but I'm interested to hear what other folks are thinking about the rebirth of Thompson Center. So, well, Roy, I appreciate you taking time to talk to me about the Encore. I'm sure Thompson Center. I'm sure it was such a chore for you.
I hate it when I have to do this kind of stuff. So
we're the happiest little boys in America. Well, Roy Huntington, our special assignments editor here at FMG Publications, thanks for joining us yet again as the unofficial co-host of the Guns Magazine podcast. Well, it's great news that Thompson Center is coming back, and there's nobody more excited than Roy Huntington, arguably the Archbishop in the cult of TC. Before we go, I would like to remind you, please check out our great new sponsor, Riton Optics. If you're looking for a new red dot or any kind of optic for your gun, check out ritonoptics.com. And if you enter the code GUNS24, you get an additional 15% off at checkout. That's ritonoptics.com. Enter the code GUNS24. I'd also like to remind you, please check out our great sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com. and AmericanCop.com, and of course, Guns Magazine at GunsMagazine.com. Meanwhile, please make sure that you don't get away from us before you hit the like and subscribe buttons. That's how we keep bringing you this great stuff week after week. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of everybody here at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent T, reminding you yet again, now get out there and get shooting.